Good evening, everybody. It is, I think, at my watch, it's 7:30 on Wednesday night, which can only mean one thing. It's time for our sports test webinar. Now, I'm hoping everyone can hear me. I'm just answering one quick question, and we should getting going. So, housekeeping to start with. I will try and do my best. I will try and do my absolute best to stick to around about 45 minutes. I'd like to be over quicker. The whole thing tonight, again, I'd like to run over in around about an hour. So I want to chat for about 45 minutes, then we'll have 10-15 minutes of questions and answers. If you have any questions as you go along, please type them in the Q&A section. I will do my best to answer them as we go along if it's relevant, or I will post an answer to them afterwards. If you wish to, then please feel free to jump onto the new portal, which is portal.sportstest.co.uk, where you can take up the offer to book a 30-minute free consultation with me. So that just gives us an opportunity to talk to you directly about what you're doing and what your needs and goals and aims are, and if I can help you out from that point of view. And of course, if you get some value from the evening, please feel free to pop, and I'll put the website down here at the bottom of the page, to coffee.com/sportstest and buy me a coffee or two. It'd be most appreciated. So the problem I have tonight is I have 90 slides and I've got 45 minutes. So it's going to be a bit of a whistle-stop tour, all about whether you are on the verge of overtraining or not, and what we can do to try and offset that if at all possible. Now I'm going to have a quick look up here before we started. We've got 33 of you online, so yeah, ready to go. It sounds pretty good. Right, so are you on the verge of overtraining? What do we need to worry about? Why is my slides not moving? Here we go. So this is me, Dr. Garry Palmer. You all know about me, and if you don't know about me, then there's a load of stuff on me on the website, all my history, all my background, and I've been director of Sportstest since 2003, and a whole load of stuff, and occasionally I pretend to be an athlete. But I want to try and give you some of my experience from all these years of competing, all these years of coaching, all these years of being a physiologist, my PhD work to get you to go faster. That's what tonight is all about, and that's what we're here for. So first thing we need to think about with overtraining is, can we, or how can we optimize your training and performance? And I'm just going to have to flick on my screen here quickly because I have got some stuff that's coming up and in the way, and I'm just going to pop that down there. Sorted. Okay, so what we're looking at, sorry, is how can we optimize the training performance? I want to get rid of me up there. God, one day I'll get used to Zoom. And it's again for those of you that have been on my previous webinars. If you haven't, they are all on YouTube. So YouTube/Sportstest. You will find all the webinars that I've done over the past 6 or 8 weeks, and we will be doing another one in a fortnight. Not sure what the title is yet. We've got about 6 or 8 titles all lined up. We will let you know in the next 48 hours what that will be. But anyway, if we're looking for performance enhancement, we've gone through all this before: planning and organization, how we structure your training program. Then we look at resting and recovery, and then ideally we look at optimizing nutrition. So it's all those elements that we need to go over with you in order to make sure that you're performing at your absolute peak. Now, one of the problems that we've got is that we need to get you here to your competition phase in the best possible shape. But of course, we've got to get your training going right. And if your training doesn't go right, your competition's not going to perform well. And if you've not got the right nutrition, your training's not going to go right, your competition's not going to go right. But we've got all these other aspects in the middle. So we've got the testing that I do to make sure that you're moving in the right track. And then we've got to look at tapering, we've got to look at resting, we've got to look at recovery to make sure that you, the athlete up here, for the sport, the event that you're doing, get to the competition that you're aiming for in the best possible shape. And so that's really what this is all about. It's about a very, very fine knife line, almost delicate balance of, if you're not doing enough training, you're going to be in a situation that you're going to get to your performance, your event, and you're going to be undercooked. And if you go slightly over that line, you're going to be overtrained and your performance isn't going to be optimal. So it's finding that magic sweet spot for you. And there's no magic formula, as we'll see in a bit. It's finding that sweet spot for you that gets you to your competition performance in the best possible way. And we go through all of this, and clearly to get you performing well, we've got to look at the engine, the size, type, and the tuning. Then we've got to look at the more the mental aspect of it, and some physiological aspects, but looking at technique, looking at reaction time, looking at psychological status. If you're a cyclist, if you're a runner, if you're a triathlete, efficiency and aerodynamics are absolutely critical, but then we can bring those into other sports as well, and maybe that comes back a little bit with technique. If we've not fueled the engine properly, we've not got the right fuel type and economy in here, then again, you're not going to perform at your peak. And again, if you're not at optimal weight. Now, all of these are really delicate balance about how we get the best from you. And the problem that I see with most, and I'm assuming, and although I've got a couple of guys who are racing that I look after and help out as professionals, I'm assuming that 99% of my audience this evening or watching this on YouTube are going to be not professional athletes. There might be good age group athletes. They might be going and doing stuff like world championships as an age grouper. But what we've got to find is we've got to get that balance just right in your training, because there's no point in absolutely hammering your training and finding that you are not responding in the way that you need to be. So it's getting that balance right in your training. And if we stray in any direction in the wrong way, then we're going to be in a situation where you're going to go the wrong way. You're not going to perform at the level that you need to, and it's getting that balance in right down the middle, so that we get your training right, your recovery right, we get your nutrition right, we get your recovery right, so that come competition day, or even putting in a good hard training session, you're not constantly overtrained, you're not constantly tired, you're not constantly fried. And I come back to this slide all the time, and I've used my old slide on here rather than my newer slide. It's about understanding your priorities. And typical cyclist, typical triathlete, as a typical, thinks far more about their bike and their body and about how they can shave a gram or two off their bike and this bit of carbon and that bit of carbon, rather than, as I am at the moment, I'm carrying around. I'm still in lockdown mode where every time I walk past the biscuit barrel, it's not just one I'm having, it's about four, and I'm not training because I'm on daddy daycare most of the time, and it's really not doing me any favors. But you still think about that bike. Oh, if my bike was a bit lighter, if this was a bit stiffer, if I spent another, pound or another £5 or another 50 quid on my bike, would I go quicker? Well, actually, no, it's about my body. And if I can get my body right, that's where I'm going to perform. And if I get which shoulder I'm looking over, that one over there, you see, it's about training smarter, not harder. And that's what we're trying to get you guys to do at the moment. We've got to get you to think about your training and how you respond to your training, but not overdoing your training. And I go through this phase, and we've done this a couple of weeks ago, so I'm going to skim through all this. It's about firstly understanding your goals and aims. And once we've understood your goals and aims, we know where you're going, we know what your short-term aim is, your medium-term aim is, what your long-term goal is. We can then start planning training phases. And again, all of this we've gone through, but it's important that we revise it for tonight and just keep it fresh in your mind. Once we know what that goal event is, we can look at putting this training pyramid together where the intensity and specificity gets harder and more intense as we move towards the goal, and the duration of the training sessions comes down as we move towards the goal. And we've got big volume here, and that volume, as we move up, that volume gets less and less and less as we get to the goal event. And if we can get that pyramid right, and the peak of the pyramid right, you should be performing at your peak. But if you're putting in too much volume at the base phase, then you're going to be overtrained. Therefore, you're not going to be able to step up to the next training phase. And likewise, if you've gone into the speed and power phase and you've been overtrained, well, you're not going to respond properly because you're now working with fatigued muscles. So it's all about this delicate balance of training and recovery. And we look at structuring the training program. And again, I've gone through this, and I'll go through it in more detail on other presentations, and I've gone through it before. Effective training is about, really, in my mind, 5 different components: adequate volume, appropriate duration of the training session, sufficient intensity of the training session. That means 2 things. That means training hard enough when we need to train hard, but easy enough when we need to train easy, making it specific to the sport that you're doing. So again, as a mountain biker, you should be doing more training on your mountain bike, even going out on those road rides on your mountain bike, so you're in that right position. Triathletes, you should be on those time trial bars far more often, so we're being as specific as we can be to the sport that we're doing. But all of it is underpinned by this concept down at the bottom on optimal recovery. There's no point in getting all of these things right if this recovery element is wrong. And we've had a couple of emails through in advance of this evening, and I think some of it's from people that can't attend tonight, but want to watch the YouTube, which should be live tomorrow. Joe's told me I won't hold him to it. It'll be sometime tomorrow or Friday, and they can't attend. And there's been questions about, well, this is the training I'm doing, and this I'm doing that, I'm doing the other, and do you think I'm overtraining? Well, the problem is optimal recovery isn't just about what elements are going on here. It's about what elements are going on here. So, little one's just gone to bed now. Slightly bigger one's going to bed fairly shortly. But a couple of 3 weeks ago, 1 o'clock in the morning, 3:30 in the morning, 6 o'clock in the morning, she's coming and paddling through to the bedroom. One night it was flick the lights on. I want to ask you a question. It's like she's not German, but I thought the Gestapo just walked in. And it doesn't matter what my training was doing. It doesn't matter how well I'm looking after all the elements of recovery. The fact that I'm being woken up 3 or 4 times in a night, it doesn't matter whether on black and white my training looks perfect. If 3, 4 times a night I'm being woken up by little person, or I'm waking up at 4 o'clock in the morning because the stress of, well, I haven't signed the new lease yet, and we've got the keys, and we've got to do this, and we've got to do that, and what have we got to do about PPE for coronavirus, and all of these things going on, you can't recover properly. So you've got to look at what training you're doing and modify it. So again, it comes back to some completely off different tangent. And although, I'll tell you guys, I sell them, there are training plans from Dr. Garry Palmer and Sportstest on Training Peaks. A standard training plan is going to work for 1 out of 100 people. It's going to be better than nothing. It's going to be better than no plan at all. But speak to all of my athletes who I'm working with at the moment. They will say to you, having that fine tuning of what I'm doing on each day, I'm tired today, we need to modify. I need to step up. I'm feeling good. Oh, what's the weather doing? Having that on a day-on-day basis, which takes into consideration the volume you're doing, the duration you're doing, the intensity, specificity, and then looks at recovery, that's where you get the best from your training. So these are the things we've got to think about. And for me, that is really, really important and really, really valuable. So anyway, moving on. It's then about training to race, not racing to train. Now, okay, at the moment we can't race, but you might come back and revisit this in 12 months' time, and racing's full on, or in the middle of the season, you're going, oh no, why are my performances not happening? And the classic is, and I'll pick on the cyclists, the time trialists, who can, do a club event on a Tuesday night, a club event on a Thursday night, an open on a Saturday, and an open on a Sunday, and they're racing 4 times a week. And because they're racing 4 times a week, they'll put in 1 or 2 recovery rides, and they'll be fine for 3, 4, 5 weeks of that, and then suddenly, boom, performance will crash. They're fried. So it's, again, what are you doing those races for? Are they training sessions? And if they are, why are you doing so many? Because you can't be training at threshold every night. Is it you're scared you're going to miss a brilliant evening? Is it that there's a series that you need to do, in which case you've got to prioritize other things? So you've got to be really focused about what you're doing. What is this session about, and where do you get the most from that training session? And really, this element here of optimal recovery, that is often overlooked. People look at their training, their performances aren't going the way they want to. And normally I'll ask a room for people and have people shout back at me at this point, what do you do if your performances aren't going well? Well, most people normally train harder. No, back off. Let's take 3, 4 days, a week off your training and see what happens. So let's back off what's going on with your training. Let's respond to what's going on. Let's look if you're getting optimal overload. Now, I use this, what I call an overload method of training. So, I quite often tell my athletes off if they do more than I'm prescribed. So yeah, there's times where they don't do as much as I want them to. And more often than not, I'll go, it's no stress. I'm not worried about that. But where they're consistently, if I put a 90-minute session in, they're doing 2.5 hours, you Nigerians listening, they're consistently going over your targets, it's not doing you any good, because we've got this overload method where I'm trying to get you in a really narrow focused training band. We spoke about that last week. I'm going to speak about it more either in a fortnight or in 4 weeks' time. And we've got this really narrow band that we're trying to train in. And that narrow band is trying to get certain elements of your fitness, certain elements of your training, and develop on those training. Now, again, we're talking about overtraining here, so I think it's really important we understand this. So I use this basic model of overtraining, overload, and I've got this concept in both my running and my cycling books. And it's a schematic, it's a concept, it's conceptual. I can't prove it. If I could prove it, if I knew timescales on this, either I'd be incredibly rich or every other bugger would know it. So we're looking here at the vertical axis of fitness. high fitness, low fitness. And we're looking at a time on the horizontal axis here. And if you do a bout of exercise here, what we're seeing happen, if you've got a low load workload, you do your training session, you get a small drop off in fitness, and it shouldn't take long to recover, but the benefit you get from doing that training session is minimal. And actually the time it's going to take to come back to baseline is also pretty quick. If you do a high intensity session here, we see a big drop off in fitness. Now that takes a lot longer to recover from. Now the difficulty I've got is I can't tell you, and tonight is not about going into training and overtraining. It's about overtraining, and it's about looking at the signs and symptoms. And I need to go into this in a lot more detail. But the concepts that we've got here is I can't tell you how this model works. So you might do the same training session, and you might get this similar drop off here. So we might get to this point down here, and what we're then going to see is that this might be a normal day of recovery. But if you've come back and you've missed your recovery drink, you've gone straight to bed without eating, you've had an argument with the partner, the cat's thrown up all over your feet, whatever it is that's going to create stress, that extra stress might mean that same training session is now going to take you twice as long to recover from. So that's what I say, I can't always guarantee with optimal recovery, you might be back much quicker. Don't know. So, but we use this as a schematic. You come back to baseline after a certain number of hours, possibly days. And then as a result of that, we then see this compensatory effect where the body responds. Now, again, the compensatory effect is probably nowhere near as big as the drop off, but I'm just proving this as a schematic at the moment. So we get this compensatory effect. And if you don't train again, you lose that. Now, what we've got to look at is a high load session, and that might be either low intensity, long duration, or it might be short, high intensity. It might be repeat sprints. It might be a short 15, 20-minute time trial effort. We don't know what that is, but a high load session is going to place bigger overload on the body and it'll take longer to recover from. A low load session, you're going to recover from much quicker. So again, it's about putting the building blocks of your training together to make sure that we mix and match those training sessions, which again is why when we spoke, I think a fortnight ago, about looking at how you use your heart rate and whether we're using power output. So go back over it was a fortnight ago, sorry, nutrition, so it would have been a month ago. It's looking at how you use those different methods and different models of training to get the best from your training. We'll explain that a lot more in that webinar, so if you missed that one. But it's really key concept of understanding what you're putting your body through, whether it's low, whether it's a high load, whether it's a mixed load, and what the focus is going to be from that. And realistically, what we then got to look at is then, in the same way, how do we build a training program? The old running adage used to be a 10% rule, we build by 10%, we'll build by 10%. No, there was no real structure to that. Was it 10% more volume? Was it 10% more intensity? And there's lots of different ways to quantify training load. Fancy watches will do it, Training Peaks will do it, Garmin, Strava, all these things give you a different method of doing it. And they're usually based along a simple method of looking at heart rate and or power, potentially as a spectrum of where your max is and where your recovery is. So looking at it as a spectrum point multiplied by a number of minutes. And then you get a training load effect from that. But rather than going on this incorrect method here, where we're just constantly, the old runner's adage, just constantly building. What I'm suggesting is we have harder weeks and easier weeks and harder weeks and easier weeks. And even if you do the same hours each week, that training load can be moved because you can do a bigger training load by having more intensity coming through. So it's trying to mix, it's trying to just push the body, give some recovery, push the body, give some recovery. And we go through in cycles. And usually at the end of a training cycle, and that for some athletes is 4 weeks, for some it's 6, for some it's 12. Usually at the end of a training cycle, we have an easier week before we start to push the athlete on again. So again, easier week. And this one has gone over 2 weeks or 2 blocks, and then we push the athlete on. So it's allowing rest and recovery and pushing on, and just seeing really where we can get you to in the best possible way and the best possible format. So rest and recovery. This is now where we come to the crux of what we need to be talking about. And I've pushed through an awful lot of information already, and I'm really skimming the surface with some of this, but this is now comes onto the critical side. So Randy Eichner, 1995, overtraining can be tersely defined as, and I can't read my own word, prolonged fatigue and reduced performance despite increased training. So that's the classic athlete's problem. I'm not performing well, but I'm putting my training load up. Well, if your training load is going up, surely your fitness should be getting better. So you're getting fatigue by putting a training load up and you're not recovering from that fatigue. So Randy Eichner, as I say, has described that as overtraining. And that for me is the critical situation that we're looking at. Can't remember Fry's first name. There we go. Has also used this term overreaching, which I think is probably in much the same sense, but it's a different element that we're looking at. It's where you're pushing your body too much, and sometimes it's intentional and sometimes it's not intentional. So again, we've got to be careful with terminology, and it's like talking about threshold and lactate threshold and anaerobic threshold. And at this point, I usually put my hands on my head in my hands and cry. So and I'm not sure I've got this in here, but somewhere there's an article that says the Eskimos have got 30 different words for snow. Well, sports scientists have got 30 different phrases for overtraining, and that's a critical issue. Is that it's defined in different ways by different people. So we've got to be careful at what we're looking at. Fry suggests that overreaching is the first stage of overtraining, which then, if you ignore it, will develop into a much more overtraining syndrome. And complete recovery from that may require weeks rather than days. So this is the point that we've got to be looking at. If you're pushing your body too hard, you're pushing your body too hard, you're pushing your body too hard. And again, I know there'll be lots of people on tonight that will be either very sad or very glad that Ironman in Wales has been cancelled in September. We're 12 weeks out from it, and all of a sudden it was like, oh right, okay, that's the Ironman mentality. I've got to put in my 15 hours a week. No, sometimes you need to back off. Sometimes you've got to look at what you're doing. Now, we've got to now play the long game. So this is good, and we can allow our body to build up more effectively. So really, if we look at the phases of overtraining, well, first of all, you've got training overload. So that's that drop in fitness that I was showing you about before we get the recovery phase. So that's the stress of training itself. I've gone out, I've run, I've biked, I've swum, something's hurting. So I went and did our virtual Wolves and Bilston. It wasn't one. No, sorry, it's not Wolves and Bilston. It was put on by Adam Guy. Great little run yesterday. Tough course. There was a virtual 5K put on that we all had to go in the space of a week, go and run the same course over. So that was the Wolverhampton Running Network he put that on for. That for me was a massive training stress. I've not run near threshold for absolutely ages. So, I'm still sore today. So I've got training overload from doing that session. Now I'm still not properly recovered. So that the training overload, the heart rate through the roof, the sweating responses, the initial sore muscles from the training, that's your training overload. Then we've got our training fatigue and stress, and that's the normal fatigue associated with days of training, or a day of training, and that little bit of, oh yeah, okay, I'm tired, but actually I've come away from a training session, I know I'm tired, I know I've worked hard, but actually give myself sensible rest and recovery, I will be fine to train again tomorrow. Or actually I've worked really hard today, tomorrow needs to be a rest day, or tomorrow needs to be a recovery day, and then I can go back into my normal plan. So that's our normal training and normal fatigue and stress. That's not overtraining by any stretch of the imagination. Overtraining is where we've got training to the point where the individual is unable to perform at their optimal level following the normal regeneration period. So normally if it takes you 48 hours to recover from a big Sunday ride, so you've gone out for that 3-hour, 4-hour ride on Sunday, normally by Tuesday you're fine. Perfect, that's great. That's what we've just come back to. I'm pointing, the screen doesn't help you out. That's the normal training fatigue stress. But if you get to that Tuesday morning and it's like, oh God, I really can't get out of bed, my legs are sore, feeling heavy, then from that point of view, this is where we're starting to look at this overtraining that's occurred. So it's just that one step too far. Overreaching is either intentional or unintentional induction of short-term overtraining. Now, again, it's intentional because I'm going away on a training camp. I've got a group of athletes coming with me, and we're all off to Spain. We're going to Spain for 5 days, 7 days, 10 days, whatever it might be. Well, the whole point of doing that is to push our bodies right as much as we can, right to breaking point almost. And so for me, you push someone to that point of overreaching. It's a short-term overtraining. It might be a bank holiday weekend in the UK where you're going to go Saturday, Sunday, Monday, big training block, boom, 3 big days. But actually, we're then going to go the Tuesday through to the following Friday. We're going to have 4 really easy days to allow the athlete to recover. So that's pushing an athlete to the point of short-term overtraining where their performance is suppressed, this drop in performance, the support performance is suppressed, but you're expecting to do it, or it might be unintentional. Coaches push them too hard, I push them too hard, they're not sleeping properly, whatever it might be. That then can be reversed with a longer than normal regeneration period. When we get to chronic overtraining syndrome, that's where your performance is massively suppressed, plus there are other symptoms which we'll talk about in a moment. And at this point, significant rest is required. The final point down here is what we would call overstrain. And that usually is acute muscle damage by isolated intensive training. And that may or may not be associated with overtraining or overreaching. As an example, you go and do a hill training session, hill reps. You've not been doing hills for absolutely ages. Go and do hill reps. You're on your toes. You're running really, really hard. Bang. Soleus calf gets really sore, gets really damaged as a result of that one isolated training session. Okay, that's more of a strain issue. Now, if the athlete was tired and fatigued before they got to that, then it might be associated with overreaching or overtraining. Or it might just be that you've just stepped up that one particular session far too much, far too quickly, far too fast, and that we need to back things off. So those are really the different phases of overtraining that we would look at. Coming on to symptoms now, this for me is really important. These are things that, you know, as a physiologist, important to stay hydrated as well. These are things for me as a physiologist I want my athletes to start telling me about, because, okay, if you're a coach and you're actually stood at the track and you've got stopwatch out, or you're going out with your cyclists and you're doing that face-to-face coaching, you'll pick up some of these. But when you're working with an athlete at distance, it's important that they understand what some of these are and they can feed them back to you as well. Sorry, something's bleeped on my computer, no idea what that was. So what we've got symptoms of overtraining: physiological, performance, psychological, immunological, and biochemical. And you don't want to say immunological when you've got a beer or two, don't you? So performance-related symptoms of overtraining: abnormal muscle soreness and pain. Okay, so you've done a heavy session, that's fine. You expect your legs to be sore. You've done a light session and your legs are sore, we go, ooh, what's going on? That's not right. Likewise, that heavy-legged feeling, like just feeling heavy, sluggish, constantly tired. Then we've got the general inability to undertake a workout. I can't get through my training session. I just really can't face it. Can't physically finish it. Usually or often associated with a drop-off in performance. So when you're looking at your stats, and we spoke about this 4 weeks ago, we're using heart rate and we're using pace, or we're using power output. For that heart rate, you're just going much slower. You're all the way down here, okay? So that's not good. And then for endurance athletes, and most of you, I'm guessing, are runners, cyclists, and triathletes that have joined us tonight, it's that reduced endurance capacity where you can keep going normally for 2-3 hours, you're getting 45, 60 minutes in. I just can't face this. So those are what I would call classic performance symptoms of overtraining. From a physiological, again, we spoke about this a fortnight ago when we were talking about heart rates and powers. Increased resting heart rates, suppressed training heart rate, we just mentioned, for a given intensity. You'll struggle to elevate your heart rate if you're training to speed or power. Post-training, when you look at your watch or you monitor it half an hour later and you go, oh, crikey, my heart rate's still high. Again, classic physiological symptom. You keep wanting to drink. I'm not thirsty, I've trained this afternoon. I didn't train, I rode with Seb for an hour and a half. And then increased night sweats, waking up in the middle of the night, restless legs, heavy-legged feeling, we'll come on to that, but actually night sweats as well. All of these being classic physiological symptoms of overtraining. From a physiological point of view, general apathy, lethargy, I just can't be asked to train, just can't get out the door. Now, again, we've got to be careful, because sometimes that can be depression, it can be other factors, and actually getting out and training can be really useful. So, you know, you can't just go, oh, I can't be asked, there must be overtraining. No. It can be other factors as well. Short attention span, constantly sort of feeling like you need an afternoon nap. The one I always laugh at here is irritability. So a classic sign is somebody who's normally placid and mild-mannered getting really irritable. So those of you that have had the pleasure of coming on a training camp with me, or would like to come on a training camp with me, I will warn you, we will turn up on a Saturday. Come the Wednesday, I'm usually like a bear with a sore head because I am not only training with you guys, but I'm talking to everyone on a one-to-one basis. I'm doing body fats. I'm doing seminars in the evening where you get to do your ride and have some food and have a nap. I'm working. And come the Wednesday with 2 or 3 days to go, to one camp many years ago, many years ago, on the Wednesday, I got about an hour into the ride. I got that peed off that I turned around and left the riders and the guide and said, I need to just go home. I needed that headspace. So, if you're feeling like that, it's important that you recognize it. But what's probably more important is a lot of these things from a physiological point of view, the apathy, the short attention span, the irritability, even when we're looking at other stuff, impaired coordination, depression, general less interest in training, often you won't notice these in yourself. It will be your partner, and whether that's a coach, whether that's a training partner, whether it's a partner at home, work colleagues that will notice these things. Take time to listen to them. Really important. Think about what you're doing. Really take time to listen to them. Again, I'm a little anecdotal at this point. I've got to watch my time. I used to have a PhD student who's now a professor somewhere in Wales, and she used to be a rower as well as doing 1,001 other things and a PhD and this, that, and the other. And I looked at her training one week, and she was just getting more and more and more bogged down with stuff, and her mood swings were changing. And that. I looked at her training, and I couldn't tell her straight that she was overtraining. So I wrote the training plan down and said, will you have a look at this for me? I almost said her name. Yeah, will you have a look at this for me? Just had this email in from a cyclist, and they've got a problem. And she took 15-second look at this piece of paper and went, Gary, I didn't need to look at that. You could have looked at that. You can clearly see this guy's overtraining. Went, cross out the word cycling, put in the word rowing, add in a strength or two conditioning session. She's gone, that's my training plan, isn't it? I went, yeah. And it took that boom, completely out of the box to throw it at her, to realize that you get so focused about what the end goal is that you've got to take a step back and look at what's going on. Health-related signs: abnormal fluctuations in body weight, loss of appetite, increased nocturnal fluid intake, general lower resistance, poor healing of wounds, disturbed sleep, gastrointestinal disturbances. I'm flying through these. These are a list which certainly in my running book I've got them. I think they're in the cycling book as well. Someone will probably prove me wrong. If they're not, I can always throw a slide up later if someone tells me, no, Gary, that's not in your cycling book, it's only in your running book. I'll throw a slide up. Next one. Let's come back to that. So what we've got a whole myriad of factors going on there. If you're always irritable, it doesn't mean you're overtraining. It means you're a miserable, irritable bugger. So it's a balance about what you've got to do. So, you go through and you go, oh, well, normally I don't sleep particularly well. That's not overtraining. And you sort of take out what's normal, and then you start looking for stuff that's happening that wouldn't normally happen. And if you've got 2 or 3 of these picking up, then you go, is there a chance that I'm overtraining? Is there a chance I'm overdoing things? How do I back stuff off? And where do I go with this to get the best from my body? And that's really what we've got to try and look at for now. So, symptoms of overtraining, I've just said that. An athlete may show one symptom, just one of those symptoms, or an array. And many authors suggest that rather than trying to compare yourself to somebody else or standard population, you look and see, yeah, okay, I'm always irritable, or, no, crikey, I banged myself today, I've bruised really easily, or I scratched myself last week. That's still not got better. So it's looking at those things and saying, this is not usual, right? We need to modify what's going on. So again, overtraining syndrome is generally a form of chronic fatigue. In elite athletes, there's this fragile balance, but not necessarily in elite athletes. In non-elite athletes as well, that try and juggle family, work, training, all commuting, finance, all the things going on in our lives, doing the shopping, painting the fence. There's this fragile balance between peak performance and chronic fatigue. And that's, again, where I think as a coach, I try and do my best job possible, is to try and get that balance right, of not pushing people too much and trying to make sure that they're recovering as well as possible. And I'm sure after tonight, there'll be 1 or 2 of the athletes that I coach come back to me and go, you're pushing me too hard. And sometimes it's done for a reason, and we've got a big long-term goal, and we've got enough time to back off, but it's a delicate balance. In elite athletes, it's been shown that as much as 6 weeks of full rest is necessary to return the individuals to the normalized status. Again, there was a lovely young lady that I worked with in South Africa many years ago. And, you know, I'll come on to some heart rates in a bit. And she was constantly saying to me, resting heart rate's 55, resting heart rate's 55. And if it went up to 58, 59, 60, we'd back her training off. She ended up having a stress fracture, which was not diagnosed by a physio, got on the wrong treatment, ended up being put into a cast for 6 weeks to reduce it. In the end of 6 weeks, her resting heart rate was down to 42. So she was chronically overtrained the whole time. In 6 weeks, with a foot in a boot, not being able to train, she was bouncing around like a kangaroo. So there's this delicate balance of, we try and use ourselves as that own baseline, but actually, have we got a true baseline? I'll come on to that in a bit. And then the psychological side effects of overtraining are often referred to as staleness. So an athlete's stale, they're not performing well, they're not, you know, they're mentally not there, they can't compete. So, you know, again, we've got to look at the psychological side of things. It's not something I really do, but we've got to think about the psychological side of things as well. Andy Lambert, I used to work with in Cape Town, has suggested that it's a 3-phase approach for overtraining. The first one is that hard training discomfort in the muscle with perceived exertion, you know, whilst exercising might increase. Well, very, very easily that's rectified with rest. So I know at the moment, you know, yeah, I've done an hour on the mountain bike, an hour and a half on the mountain bike set, but I know I'm still sore from running yesterday. So that's typical phase 1. That's not a problem. I can recover if I have sufficient rest. So I'll rest tomorrow and I'll run on Friday. Phase 2 is actually, if you keep trying to train through it, we're going to see that decline in performance. And then the other symptoms that we spoke about might also develop. At this point, a few days of rest, 3 to 5 days, 3 to 7 days might be sufficient to back an athlete off. And often where I'm starting to see upper respiratory tract infections, really small things, I'll actually say to an athlete, look, go and have a week off, go and have 4 or 5 days easy. And they really don't want to because they're scared of losing that fitness. But actually having 4 or 5 days off is going to give them what they need to get them back onto ground zero and get them pushing off forward again. Phase 3 is when we've got the athlete pushing on, and we see full-blown overtraining syndrome occurring. But as I said to you before, other external stresses could simulate it. So poor nutrition, poor environment, poor sleep, work stress, family stress, financial stress, all of the crap that's going on in the real world at the moment, all of that can actually, you look at what you would be doing normally in a normal environment where you're not stressed, and all of a sudden it's wolf overload, can't cope with what I'm doing from a training point of view. So we've got to look at those phases and see where you are in them. From there, moving forward, what we're going to try and do is we're going to try and help you now identify if you're getting overtrained. So we've spoken about this, and I go back to what I spoke about, keep waving my arm all the way over here. We go back to what we spoke about a fortnight ago. So basic training principles, use of heart rate. And I think heart rate is key, far more than rate perceived exertion, far more than power output, far more than pace. Use a heart rate monitor. They're not expensive. You don't have to go out and buy something that's stupidly expensive. Go and get a 30 quid heart rate monitor, so at least you can see how your body is responding. Use a training diary, look at diet, look at training, look at mood, look at weather, all the factors that might impact on your training. Stuff that I try and do with my athletes, I'll continually try and review what they're doing in their training, continually try and see whether their training responses are taking them the right way. Again, with the guys that I coach rather than the plans I give are okay, but the guys that I coach, they'll continually have their training plan changed. They won't be doing the same session. I'll be looking back over previous weeks and building up the interval sessions, mixing up the intensities, mixing up the durations of what we're doing. So their plan is continually evolving and improving them. When we can get back in the lab, certainly the physiological assessment I do is absolutely crucial. I don't do psychological assessment, but there are people that I can recommend that you go to if that would help. And then it's looking at correct nutritional practices and, where possible, trying to remove other external stresses. So these are all the things that we can do to help, firstly, identify and then help offset that overtraining syndrome. So heart rate monitor, power monitor, again, went through all this a fortnight ago. Back to my webinar there. Ensure sufficient training load, that's the crucial thing. That's why we're using them. But it's feedback during performance, but it's an early warning system for illness, overtraining, hydration, and nutrition. If you need any more detail on that, the webinar on YouTube, so YouTube/Sportstest from 4 weeks ago. but it's not always smooth sailing. We do end up with problems in the road sometimes, and that's one of the things that we've got to be aware of. Heart rates, and we've gone through all of this, is affected by heat. So you can't only be impacted by that. And it's affected by dehydration, it's affected by adrenaline, it's affected by fatigue. So we can't just be going, oh, just my heart rate says this. Now, again, I can't show you on here probably, but if I look at what let's try and do it on here, see if you can see it, boom, boom. So I look at, you sure you can see that? That's my heart rate of what's been going on. The last couple of nights, I've not been sleeping particularly well. I've been training quite hard, and my heart rate's been creeping up. So I've got to take that as, that's my average resting heart rate each day, worn 24 hours a day. Ooh, I need to just be careful about what I do tomorrow. But when we're training with heart rate doesn't give us an instantaneous response to training. There's a time lag. So it's got to be used as a guide rather than absolutely precise, but it's a great indicator of whole body metabolic stress. So as long as your body is doing what you need it to, we can use our heart rate to tell us what's going on with our physiology. And if things aren't going right, as we've seen up here, it can be telling us about fatigue. It can be telling us about we're getting to the point we're going to start to overtrain. We then come and look at your training. How do we offset? How do we bypass overtraining? Well, we've got to structure your training levels properly. And again, that's where hopefully using someone like myself, good coach comes in, backing that up with some lab-based testing to give these training zones that we need to be at. So structuring training levels are all dependent on maximum or threshold heart rate, and therefore the right training zones. It's dependent on your power or your pace profile. It's dependent on your present fitness, your goals, your aims, your training phase, and most importantly, your rest and recovery, because rest and recovery is absolutely crucial. If you've not got your rest and recovery right, you are going to be fried. That, to me, is the key element. So, basic principles. We use heart rate, we use a training diary. Sorted. We continually review your training responses. So, look at what's going on. Look at what Training Peaks is telling us. Look at what Strava is telling us. Now, I don't believe those values, but it helps us look at what's going on and just give us that overview. You know, what's Strava telling you? What's Zwift telling you? What's Training Peaks? What's Trainer Road telling you? Whatever platform that you use, it will give you an understanding. Now, as I said, don't treat it as gospel. Tell me, you know, what's your Garmin telling you? But just looking, was that how I was feeling? It's made you think. Go back and review. And it's the continual reviewing, rather than going, computer says I'm going to agree with computer, it's reviewing it with that information, if at all possible. So I was just Claire. Claire's just asked, she says she appreciates that wrist-based heart rate watches aren't as accurate as chest straps, but do you think good enough to use as a guide? Claire, yes, I would say I do. But again, I reviewed this sort of 4 weeks ago. If your session is critical, you wear your chest strap. But what I do, and I don't know if you can see it particularly well tonight, so you can see I've got a nice bit there, which I shaved a little bit of hair on the back of my wrist, and you can see how much my watch puts an indent into my arm. So I clean the back of it, and I wear that all the time, and it seems to be fairly accurate. Although if I look at the 5K run that I did yesterday, and although I put my chest strap on, it didn't pick up properly. So I was running on wrist heart rate. It said for the first 3.5 Ks, I was running at a heart rate of 145. And for the last 1.5 K, where it suddenly picked up properly, my heart rate jumped up to 180. So it will give you an understanding. It will give you a basis. And if it's massively out, you generally know there's a problem. It's where it's 5 beats out and you go, oh, hang on a minute, we start to look. And if things get critical, put your chest strap on for that training session, for the critical training sessions. So hopefully that's helped you out on that one, Claire. So I can put that one as answered, bugger. So I'm trying to do 2 things at once. Right, ignore that one there. We've gone through this. Interesting, continually changing. Ramp up your training plan. Don't get a training, please don't get a training plan from a book, because it's just, here's a block, boom, 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 standard. One size fits all. And realistically, we're all different shapes and sizes. We all need something different. And, you know, realistically, get what works for you. Likewise, if you can afford to, come and see me. Let's get this physiological assessment done. Hopefully, I sent a mass email out to a good number of people yesterday telling you what's going on with the lab and what's going on with bookings. I'm hoping with the next 4 to 6 weeks, I should be able to see people. I'm going to prioritize my coaching clients first. Those people that have bought gift vouchers that are desperate to come in, they will be in next, and then the diary will open to everybody. So I know I've got people knocking my door down without the right PPE, without the right Public Health England guidance. I can't see you yet, but I will see you very, very quickly, I promise. And we'll get the physiology sorted, we'll get the understanding going, what's going on, your training zone's right, and we'll make sure you're training at the right intensity. Nutrition, we spoke about a fortnight ago, and I'm probably going to do a bit more of a nutrition seminar in another fortnight or another 4 weeks' time. And then if we can get rid of the external stresses. Now, I know I've gone through those points twice. These things for me are really, really, really critical. So how do we actually treat you if you have got to the point of overtraining? You've been daft, you've been racing too much, you've been training too hard. Lockdown for you has meant, great, permanent training camp because I'm on furlough. Some people it is, and other people it's like, oh God, there's an absolute stress. So we need to minimize those risks and ensure sufficient rest between training sessions to recover from all associated symptoms. Where we're going into a competition, we need to look at the use of tapers. And whether it's somebody that's doing a time trial every Wednesday night for the next 10 weeks, back them down, back them down, back them down. If you're doing a big event, it might be a 3-week tapering. I'll tell you about that in a bit. And then it's using this rest. Rest is as important, if not more important than training. That doesn't mean you can rest 6 days of the week and perform to your peak. It means you've got to rest just that little bit more. And again, I've got a slide in a minute that says at least 1 rest day a week. A lot of my athletes, you speak to my athletes, they will have 2 rest days a week. I think Dave Hathaway's on here. Dave's now done a couple of double Ironmans. I give him at least 1 rest day a week, sometimes some weeks 2. And he's like, I want to train. I know, but you've got to allow the body to recover. And it's allowing the body to recover that actually allows your physiology to respond to what you're doing. So it's this delicate balance of pushing the body, but getting the recovery right. And if we get the recovery right, you shouldn't be getting to the point of overtraining. Therefore, we're going to get better responses from you. I knew it was coming soon. At least 1 rest day. That's 1 complete rest day every week. That doesn't mean 1 day where you're not training, so you're mowing the lawn, painting the fence, stacking a whole load of bricks, whatever, shifting everything up on your feet, active all day. It really should be, can you have 1 rest day in the week where you're as sedentary as you possibly can be? Mark Shepherd's just asked rest, active rest. Mark, I still, for my athletes, prefer 1 complete rest day a week. I would generally do that on a day that you're working. So, we'll try and pin you to your desk. It might mean that you can have an easy walk or something like that. But I would rather say, no, give yourself a rest day rather than an active recovery day. Because the problem that I find with so many athletes, and I know you're one of the best, you're one of the worst. So many athletes, I find that rest day, the active recovery day, either becomes too long, or they're not watching their heart rate, their power, their intensity, and suddenly the intensity starts creeping up. And realistically, we know any session that's more than about 20 minutes is no longer a rest and recovery session. It's eating too much into glycogen stores, and it's eating too much into recovery. So unless you are really, really disciplined and it's only going to be 20 to 30 minutes, no, rest day, 1 every week. If you're on a cyclical basis, probably 1 easy week every, Tonya, I'll pick you up on that later. 1 easy week every month if we can. And again, it depends on how the athlete is responding. And sometimes the athlete might not even realize it's an easier week. And then I think it's very, very worthwhile. But what we're looking at is we have 1 easy or rest month every year to allow the body to respond properly. So if we're training hard, if we're looking at repeated training days, if we're on a training camp, how do we recover optimally? So this could be, how do I get my athletes to recover from high intensity training, from a training camp situation, from just training bang, bang, bang hard every day? Well, first thing, when we did this a fortnight ago, recovery drink immediately post-exercise. Typically, glycogen synthase, the enzymes that are responsible for putting the carbs back in the muscle, are activated by exercise. So 75 to 150 grams of carbs within 15 minutes if possible. Normal meal 2 hours later. If you want to go through the whole spiel of an hour's worth of what you do before, during, and post-exercise, webinar from 2 weeks ago, YouTube /Sportstest, and then go for the nutrition webinar from 2 weeks ago. Ideally, small amount of protein in there helps uptake the carbohydrates, and it helps offset protein damage. Rehydrate at least 25% more than sweat loss. Again, I've done all that before. Potentially, if you're doing heavy repeat training days, 10 to 15 minutes ice baths. That could just be a bath of cold water. Keep the water moving. It could be, as we'll often do, if we're in Spain in March, we'll go and stand in the swimming pool up to our waist, or we'll go and stand in the sea up to our waist. That's just enough to flush things out. Now, there will be an article, I'm not sure if James is on tonight, but one of the journalists got in touch with me, James Witts, who used to be one of the editors at 220 Triathlon magazine, and is doing something for Cycling Plus that will go out hopefully next month. And James, James picked my brain about this about a week ago. I don't think he even realised I was doing it. And I sent him my slides. I said, look, if you're a recreational athlete, this isn't necessary. You don't need to have an ice bath after a hard training session. But actually, if you're battering your body for a training camp scenario, it's not going to harm. So it's not something that, unless I was training for a marathon, and I haven't been stupid enough to do that for a few years, I might jump in a cold water bath, and it's not full of ice. It's just cold tap on, cold water bath, fully submerged, 10, 15 minutes. I might do that after my really long Sunday run. But other than that, I wouldn't be bothering about it. So this is if we're in really heavy training phase. Stretch, post-exercise, generally hold that stretch for 1 to 2 minutes. Compression tights, massage where possible. So again, my wife's lovely, but she wouldn't offer to come and massage. I've got a massage gun, which I potentially use, and then good nutrition. So if I've done a hard training session, my scenario would be, I've come back from my training session, recovery drink, or I'm grabbing my recovery drink out the fridge, I'm going down to the swim pool on training camp, and I'm standing in the pool drinking my recovery drink. I've then gone back to my room, I've had a bit of a stretch, I've probably then showered off, put my compression tights on, and if I can, later in the day, I've had a massage, and then about an hour and a half or so, 2 hours after my training session, I've had my good nutrition, and I've probably gone for a nap in the afternoon if I've got a chance, and I'm not always with clients, and then the next day can repeat again. But remember, on these training days, these training camp days, I'm on the bike for 4, 5, 6 hours a day. But this was the same principle I used with Haute Route. It was the same principle when I did my 8 days on Le Loop, which is the Tour de France circuit that we did. Now, some of that was sat in a coach, but it was where I was able to finish. It was straight, boom, boom, boom. Those are the routines that I would follow. And that's what we need to think about. All of these little things will help you avoid overtraining. Monitoring waking heart rate. We've spoken about heart rate. Keep picking up on this. So it's a great excuse for a lie-in. Look for your lowest average minute. If your heart rates are elevated by more than 5 beats, modify your training session. So train, but keep it shorter. Train, but keep the intensity down. If it's elevated by more than 10 beats, take a rest day. Don't be scared. I have a rest day. See what it does tomorrow. If you get ill, following illness, your immune function is going to remain suppressed for a further 5 to 10 days following the return of heart rate to normal. So actually, although your heart rate's back to baseline, you go, I'll go and train now. No, your immune function will still be suppressed. You're likely to pick a rebound illness up if you're not careful. Sorry, I've got a itchy nose. So there's this really delicate balance. Look at more waking heart rate. It gives you a really good understanding of what's going on and can help you say, am I doing too much? Do I need to back off? And then in terms of major performances, tapering can aid full recovery. So generally, I would say a taper before a major event is going to be at least 14, but up to 21 days. So if we're doing an Ironman, we're doing a big event that's our critical focus, up to 21 days, I'm going to start backing my athletes off. The lower levels of the taper are achieved by reducing the volume and the duration of the sessions and not the intensities. And again, there's a little taper article and there's some examples that I've got on the blog section of the website. And then finally, optimizing nutrition. Well, we've done nutrition a little bit. We're going to come back to nutrition. I've already gone over time. So training program design, crucial bits, not just from a Sportstest point of view, but with every athlete that I work with, it would be, what are your needs? What are we trying to achieve? Whether it's weight loss, whether it's going faster, what are we trying to get from you? What are your goals? Where are we trying to get you to? So whether it's running a marathon, whether it's losing 5 kilos, whether it's getting healthier, what are your goals? Richard's just asked, whilst I'm going along, I'll answer this. What are my thoughts on heart rate variability as a sign of overtraining? Well, Richard, I'll revert you back to the heart rate power discussion we had 4 weeks ago. And I'll just answer this really quickly. The problem with heart rate variability is I haven't seen enough clear evidence, and to a certain extent, resting heart rate is a good model, but it's not a precise model. I haven't seen enough evidence that heart rate variability is great for everybody. For some people, it works really well. Some of my athletes have got Whoop bands and they think they are fantastic, and they absolutely precisely say, yeah, I'm getting to the point of overtraining. This is a brilliant device. And other people go, well, this is just a complete waste of time looking at that. And I've tried to use it myself. I tried to use it in the run up to World Champs a couple of years back, 2015. And there were some days that my heart rate variability was telling me I was absolutely fried, and I needed to go out and train because I knew I couldn't for work and family reasons the following day. And I thought I'll go out and do an easy session, and I'd go out and I'd have a session that was absolutely blitzed. And there would be other days that would say to me, your recovery is brilliant, Gary, heart rate variability is looking good. And you would go out and I would just feel absolutely flat and empty. So from personal experience, I've struggled with heart rate variability. So it's a difficult one. Some people, if you feel that it works for you, then again, it's a computer says model. Don't swear by it 100%, but use it as a guide would be the best thing that I would say to you. So hopefully that's helped. Hang on, let's just going to try and get through these next few slides. Questions are coming in thick and fast now. So back to training program design, set objective goals. Neil, I'll come on to you in a second. Target your required adaptations with specific training, and then design a regimen that's got overload, but most importantly, as we've discussed tonight, it's got clear amounts of overload, clear amounts of recovery that allow you to recover. But they've also got to be interesting and challenging. There's no point if it's tedious. There's no point if it's getting boring. There's no point if you're doing the same thing time and time and time again. Objectively evaluate progress. Come back in for a sports test. Look at what your heart rate's doing in reflection to power, pace. Again, we did the FTP myth or reality 4 weeks ago, which was all about heart rate and power and stuff like that. So again, do a 20-minute test, but be aware of the downfall of doing it. But use that to see whether you're going quicker. Go out and do a 3-hour loop if that's the thing you're riding towards. Can I perform that at a lower heart rate? Do I not fatigue as much at the end? All of those things. So evaluate your performances. Then, of course, what we can do for you, you can obviously get your training books from us. So we've got the running book and the cycling book. Physiological testing, as I said to you, hopefully come July time, we will be back open for business, and looking forward to seeing you all in the lab and giving you some really clear answers as to what's going on. Training program design from a point of I can coach you, I can give you training plans, we can be really, really focused in what we're doing. Coaching, just mentioned that. And thank you. I've run quite long again tonight. I've got 55 minutes, so I'm going to open up to questions now, but just a little reminder of two things. If you found this useful, have a quick fly over to ko.fi.com /sportstest. Show your appreciation by buying me a coffee. If you want to have a one-to-one with me at some stage in the next week or two, my diary you can find. And it's not always 100% open, but it's open at the moment. But I might have to say, no, I can't quite do this time. We need to tweak that. But my diary at the moment is, you will find it at portal.sportstest.co.uk. And in that you can book basically a 30 minutes question and answer session with me, and talk to me about what your goals and aims and needs and questions are, and I'll try and help you out as best as I can. No charge for that one. And then please go online and get ready to book your sports test. Right, so that's me. I'm going to have a quick drink, then I'm going to start answering questions. So questions please, everyone. So Neil has said, did a long ride a few weeks ago, went to work the next day and felt fine, but the following day at work you were totally done in. That's absolutely not a surprise at all. So again, that almost shows that your body will be, it's almost like a fight or flight situation is how I describe it, Neil. So you've pushed hard, your body knows it's got to push hard, and then you finished a training session, but you've got to go to work. And again, you've got that day, which for you, I know is mentally and physically a long day, mentally, physically challenging day and a long day. And you've had to keep up for it. And then you just can't, your body just can't sustain itself. And that's where you go crash. And that may then take, several days to recover from. But it's a case of, are you sleeping well? Are you eating well? What have you done on that work day? What did you do in the ride? So again, it's coming back to best practice. So, you've done that long ride. I saw it, you put in a great 100-mile ride. But it's then, as soon as that ride's finished, have you got good nutrition in? Have you then stretched a bit? Have you slept that little bit extra? So it's going through all of those phases and making sure that you're looking after yourself as properly as you can do. So hopefully that's helped you out. Yes, we must also get out on a bike ride. So we will chat and get you on a bike ride as soon as possible. Jane, really brilliant session. Thank you very much. Training camps. These are not closed camps at all. We do run open training camps, and yes, there will be a newsletter email about any future camp options. We were meant to be going to Spain at the end of March this year, but for some strange reason, we didn't. No idea why. Yes, but yeah, Jane, at the moment, those are mostly cycle camps, but hopefully if all this virus and travel stuff sorts itself out, we'll be able to get our training camps going again. And they're a great way to meet athletes, meet each other, meet me, and pick my brain every day. Mark Shepherd, and I think Mark and IB have probably just come and asked the same question. So Mark has just said, I've saved 3 hours a day not commuting. Yes, great. And training's up a lot. You're having easy days. I'm wanting you to totally implode. No, I'm not needing you to totally implode, Mark. I know what you're like, and it's what's right for you. And I think the point that I made before is, effectively you're your own normal. Most of the athletes that I work, and IB has come on is asking the same question. So IB has asked me, what do I think of light recovery rides or cross training on recovery days? A light jog or resistance training of cycling is your main discipline. Well, it's that same argument of there's this delicate balance. For me, your rest day is the day that your body regenerates as much as we can possibly get it to regenerate. So if you're going out for a light ride, a cafe ride, an easy ride, or you're going to go and do some gym work, or you're doing some cross training, we get to the point that actually you're not diverting all the resources that your body needs to allow it to recover, because you're going and being active still. So there's this real delicate balance. If you're in that scenario, it says, right, I've got this rest day here. Okay, we keep it light. And Tonya made a comment before of he's walking on his rest days. Okay, we keep it light. We walk, we stay active. That's fine. We hit our 10 to 15,000 steps a day. So we're still doing something. Now, if we take ourselves into a slightly nicer environment, then that maybe we take that as an acceptance that I'm not constantly working, but we've got to allow our body to recover. I've had elite athletes in the past racing at a pro level where I've looked at their training and I've backed them right down. I've backed them down to 8-10 hours a week where they were previously doing 20 to 25, and given them 2 full rest days, and they're climbing the walls. And after about 6 weeks of having those rest days, they're then going, I now get this. But for me, if we look at, and again, Mark, I want to go into, and IB, it might be right for you as well, over the next couple of weeks, one of the sessions that I want to do is go into the data that I provide from the test again. And I know you both come in regularly, which is absolutely fabulous. And I think the problem sometimes that the 2.5 hours, 3 hours that we spend together in assessment, I can't go through everything. There is so much information I want to go through, and I want to talk to everybody, and we might only find there's 5 of you on that night, where I talk to you about what the test results show me. And I think the critical thing is, if we look at the level of exercise that you're doing on a zone 1 day, on a rest day, and we multiply it by the duration that you're doing, and then you look at the demand on your nutrition, for example, you will realize that it's no longer a rest and recovery day. Because if you're still burning through 2 grams of glycogen per minute, 1.5 grams of glycogen per minute, but let's make my maths easier, 2 grams of glycogen per minute, and you're going out for 2 hours, you've gone through 240 grams of carbs. That's half of your glycogen store in a 2-hour recovery ride. Now, I don't see how that can be classed as recovery. So this is, and you know, I'm talking at Mark at the moment, but this is where when we spoke in the run up to you doing European champs, I wanted you to push your exercise intensities up a lot more than what you were doing. But in order to do that, you've then got to make sure you're doing proper recovery. You're doing nothing in your recovery days. So it's a challenge, and I don't think there's a right answer and a wrong answer. And you know, when I used to teach my students, I would always say to them, as long as you can justify what you're allowing an athlete to do, and you can have that discussion with them, there isn't a right or wrong answer. And you know, if you're of a belief that your recovery day where you're doing an hour to 2 hours of really easy zone 1, or you're doing a different discipline is actually better for you for mental reasons, for keeping you active, for whatever reason, I can't disagree with that. But from my point of view, if it was a complete rest day where for instance, you're having a complete rest day, I put your rest day down on Friday, I don't want you to be active, okay, you can go out for a walk for half hour, 45 minutes, so you've got your steps in, and actually the rest of the time you're going to go and get your hour and a half massage. That I think is going to be better for you than going out for a light jog or going and doing resistance work. So that's where I am with that. So hopefully I've answered that for you. And I think, unless anybody else has got, that's us. There's 11 questions done so far. There's still 50 of you on board. Has anyone else got any questions for me? Okay, well, let's draw that as just over an hour. It's an hour and 6 minutes. Thank you very much again for coming along this evening. We will have another session in a fortnight's time. So that was Wednesday, the 24th of June at 7:30 in the evening again. We will announce the topic for that. We've got a number of topics listed. We will announce the topic for that probably on Facebook in the next 48 hours or so. For those of you that want to come and re-listen to my ramblings, you will find them on YouTube, hopefully as of tomorrow or Friday. So that's YouTube/Sportstest. And I'll rattle my little tin again. If you want to come and say thank you, buy me a coffee. It's coffee, ko-fi.com/sportstest, as we've got there. And if you want to book a one-to-one with me, then we're looking at the portal onto my website. So it's portal.sportstest.co.uk. When we're starting to take our bookings again, that will also be the link that you will need for bookings. And just to let you know, if you want a priority booking, get yourself a gift voucher booked. And we're looking forward to seeing you in the very, very, very near future. So thanks everyone for coming on board this evening. Thank you for your time. Hope you found it valuable, and I look forward to seeing you all again soon. Cheers everyone. Bye now.